sure if Rachel's here. No. John Robinson. Good afternoon. Sorry to keep you waiting.
No problem at all. Hello everybody. I present here today as a private citizen, but also come with my other hats as a community development social worker, having worked in Christchurch in one NGO or another for the last 16 years. Firstly, I want to acknowledge the incredibly difficult position that the current council is in. You lead and are led by the city in addressing the legacy of the seismic events of 2010 and 2011. Thank you for the enormous individual and corporate energy that's being invested in this work. Legacy. A series of outcomes that follow events and decision-making processes, whether they be deeply personal or broadly interpersonal. We're all living out some kind of legacy at the moment. The quakes brought their own legacy of devastation at many different levels. The city was broken, but they also left a positive legacy in the intense outpouring of deliberate community in the minutes, weeks, months and years after the events. Care for others in worse circumstances, heroic efforts by individuals and organisations at providing for people's basic needs, shelter, food, water, power, other key infrastructure, basic human care and comfort. In considering the role of the LTCCP as coping with the negative legacy and propagating the positive legacy of the quakes, I want to highlight a number of issues. Firstly, housing. Thank you for taking this seriously. Please retain a focus on providing social housing and affordable housing in conjunction with central government and the private sector. I've done the rental dance with my family like so many people have in this city, and I constantly have people in my office as a community worker who are doing that dance and in a lot worse circumstances than our family. Let's keep it a focus. Infrastructure. Thank you for seeking the best possible result for our needs for clean water, electricity, gas services and transport routes. We all need these to sustain life, and we all need connection with others to make the act of living meaningful and sustainable. Enduring local, national and international research acknowledges that strong relationships are the thing that enable people to transcend difficult circumstances and make the most of what facilities remain. It's the relationships that count. Speaking of facilities, the community facilities of the City Council house many non-governmental organisations places that facilitate those strong relationships. Now, with the carnage wrought by the quakes, the use of facilities is understandably under review, but there are questions. How will the community have input into which facilities remain open and are repaired? What provision would be made for the community organisations who occupy facilities that may well have to close? Already underfunded community agencies could not afford market rents or in most cases sustain full facility management responsibilities. Therefore, low-cost access to the use of council community facilities by community organisations needs to remain. I want to contrast this notion against the discourse regarding the anchor projects. Firstly, I acknowledge the incredibly complex contingencies surrounding these projects in terms of managing relationship with central government. My concern is that Christchurch may increasingly become a city divided amongst socio-economic lines, with big projects that we are all paying for only accessible by a smaller proportion of us. We may end up being a city rich in facilities but poor in relationships, and that will make us all the more vulnerable to disaster. The Strengthened Community Strategy says that the Council recognises its role in supporting and strengthening communities by providing opportunities for all people to have fair and equitable access to services and resources. We, our city, have been admired internationally for innovation and excellence on a budget, as community responses proliferated in the aftermath of the quakes and continue to happen. In my view, smaller scale projects that decrease expenditure and enable broad community access are a better, more sustainable solution going forward for us all. An example of this is the Linwood Service Centre and Library being developed at Eastgate. This dynamic initiative is incredibly positive for the Linwood, Woolston, Phillipstown communities. In a lower income area, having easily accessed hub to which people can walk or cycle is very beneficial. Well done. I would urge Council to consider committing to the Linwood Service Centre and Library becoming a permanently positioned at Eastgate. I'm nearly done. Excellence and innovation on a budget. In early March this year, share a very quick personal story, I had one of the greatest privileges of my life, that of journeying with my 89-year-old mum through the last stages of her dying process. All of us come to the death of a parent in different ways. I wasn't able to be there for my dad, but I was for my mum. She left a legacy, not in physical assets, but from a life devoted to the selfless care of others in the communities in which she lived. Looking after people's physical needs through baking or providing food vouchers, showing genuine interest in the health and well-being of those around her, creating opportunities for connections between people by having them in a modest little over-60s unit. Mum got the basics right. She made the best of what she had, and so should we. As our generation look to leave a legacy for future Christchurch residents, let it be a legacy of provision for the basic needs of all, and through creation of context for meaningful, life-enhancing connection with others, encouraging innovation, excellence and community on a budget. Thank you.
I kind of want to just applaud you, really. I know. I stopped applause the other day, but I just want to applaud. I do, seriously. We've learnt the double thumbs up, so that's amazing. Phil?
I want to thank you too for an excellent submission, and it's been quite profound for me. And greetings from me as a former social worker too myself. Cheers. Look, I want to ask you a question which I asked another submitter, because you refer to the housing and people who are vulnerable. I just want to ask you your view as a social worker and community worker about any council role in supporting housing for the homeless or people who are homeless.
Well, I think it's incredibly important, and rather than just repeat the words of other people that have spoken, although I'm going to, I think people in vulnerable situations create vulnerability for others. We certainly have quite a number of homeless people through our centre, the Linwood Resource Centre, and for those that we're able to provide support for, in some way, shape or form, it's great for them, which is fantastic, and their risk to the wider community is lessened. So I agree with a lady who spoke earlier that when we do proactively care for our most vulnerable, it makes sense to our hearts and it also makes sense to our pockets, ultimately long term.
Thank you very, very much. So I'm sorry, but that's... thank you. And...